Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, spanking scandal revealed. Also, the V-Team takes a look at the Influentials poll. And the voters have a message for the state legislature. I'm Bill Britt, and I approve that message. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V. Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by the V-Team. Welcome all.
Hi.
Hello, hello.
Everybody staying warm?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's a little cold on the head.
Yeah. Well, you know, icicles for Christmas? No. We got icicles after New Year's Day, right? Lots of icicles. APR, Alabama Political Reporter, was able to launch its first Influentials poll, Beth, this last week. And somebody said it sounded like a Democrat wish list. Some people said this was who wrote this, and other people thought, you know, these people might be onto something. I think they're onto something.
I think so too. You know, I think what was telling about it, looking at the results, is that Republicans and Democrats are both saying, why are we focusing on these ridiculous issues? We've got crumbling infrastructure. We've got schools that need attention. We've got a healthcare crisis. Our prisons are falling apart. And we've got all of these actual real issues. And the Republican agenda is red meat for the base. The Democrats don't have an agenda usually. Maybe Anthony Daniels will come up with something this year. But, you know, we need to actually get on the same page for the people of the state.
Yeah, and Susan, just a little bit for our viewers, this poll, can you tell us a little bit about how it was conducted?
These polls are blind polls in that we know we have put together a list of people that are from leadership in the legislature to, you know, people that are political consultants, you know, people that are lobbyists and whatever, and we send this poll out to them. When it comes back blind. We have no idea who filled out the poll. And the nice thing about that is they can be completely honest. They don't have to worry about if someone said, well, I thought infrastructure was more important than prisons.
Right.
Then they don't have to worry about the ramifications from that. So what we get back is actually pretty pure.
I mean, Josh, infrastructures and encouraging new industry, workforce development, those were the top three items.
Yeah, you know, and I think that it's right. It is a Democratic wish list, but you know that's mainly because normally the Democratic Party has an idea of doing real things and having some real idea about stuff. But you know, and we're not wasting time on things that are just nonsensical. You'll notice on here that we're not saving statues or figuring out another way to add guns to another spot somewhere.
Or we don't have kneeling NFL players is not on the list for Alabama's multiple NFL teams.
Well, I mean, we've got the Panthers and the Tennessee folks, the Titans. It's just like Mississippi. You know, we're so close to having a lottery.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, Mississippi will get it first.
Right.
I thought it was really interesting, though, Susan, we look here and that building new prisons was at the bottom of the list by a long shot.
It was. I expected it to be a little higher than it was really, but no, it was resoundingly at the very, very bottom.
Well,
And
part of that's and part of that's because, as we've discussed, it's not new prisons that we need. It's
Right.
reform in our existing prisons.
Right.
We've got to clean the house we got before we go buying a bigger one.
Well, it seemed to me like Bentley was just excited he was going to get him some new prisons, and I don't think that Governor Ivey's all that cranked up about it. But Josh, another thing that was interesting here: school choice in charter schools, second to the last.
Yeah, that's been a big push, and especially in Montgomery, there's been a big push for charter schools and school choice, and you hear that a lot. And really, it's just a way to divert, public money into private business. Because the one thing that you'll always learn, the one question no one can ever answer is when you ask them, what can you do in a charter school that you cannot do in a public school?
Right.
And they can never answer that question because there's nothing. There's nothing you can do. You still have to follow the law, still have to follow all the same rules. And so you're going to have these problems that you have here. Until you go and address the underlying problems, you're not going to be able to fix
I
the
can
schools.
answer that question, though, and it's discriminate.
Yeah.
Like, that's it.
Also, the teachers don't have to have the certification levels that they do to be in a public school.
Well, and
So
I think
there's a problem
one
there.
thing you can do there is make a whole lot more money if you own them than the state makes.
Yeah.
I also thought that, budget reform, that was number 4, and then increasing taxes. And I tell you, there's proportionately Republicans and Democrats were answering these polls, and these, or at least sent these polls, and these guys right here said the unthinkable. We need to raise some money.
Well, there's no one when you speak to them privately. There's no one in this state who doesn't believe, maybe Trip Pittman, but okay. Otherwise, there's nobody else in this state who doesn't believe we need to raise taxes on a few things and that we are criminally underfunding our government and our schools and our court systems. Just take a walk through a courthouse sometime in the back hallways and look at the abandoned offices. It looks like they're on a fire drill.
Let's take a little instance here. We were talking about gas tax a little while, a few years ago. Well, the efficiency of cars is a lot better, so you're not getting as much proportionately as you should. Meanwhile, we got an infrastructure that's crumbling, so a school bus has to drive 30 miles out of the way to pick up a child that can see across a lake because the bridge is broken. So we're paying for the maintenance on the bus, we're paying for the gas. Is this just magically going to come off of a tree somewhere?
Yeah, well, you're going to have to go back to the George Wallace model. It's a fee. We just have to have more fees. They're not taxes, they're fees.
It's realistic. We're going to have to raise revenue.
Well, if we want to attract business, we've got to have good roads, bridges, we've got to have internet capacity, we've got to have infrastructure. We got about 2 minutes. I want to get to this next story, and this was one I really did not want to do, but it came out and it had to be done. Brandy Ayers, longtime publisher of the Anniston Star, a liberal, I would say liberal to progressive paper. We broke the story that he, for a number of years, Susan, would spank female employees, and this was known widely. He had the nickname Spanky. And it sounds funny, but it's horrible what he did.
And I want to thank Veronica Kennedy for being the one that was brave enough to come out and blow the whistle on this. She really stood up and did a good thing so others could come out. Apparently from the 70s to the 90s, he liked to run around spanking female reporters with a pica ruler, or pica pole as we call it in the industry, which for those that don't know, is kind of a flimsy little ruler-looking thing that's metal.
But Josh, they sat there all these years and just let the story sit. But it's this Me Too movement, I guess, that's brought it forward.
Yeah, I think so. I think that has, kind of empowered a lot of women to come forward and tell these stories that they've held on to for a long time. And good for them, and good for Veronica, and good for, the Alabama Political Reporter for putting this out there and giving them a venue to share this story. And because that's what started this whole thing, and that's what we kind of do. But, I think that, first of all, this is so weird.
It is.
It is so weird. The excuse of I called her doctor, and the doctor's orders was for me to spank her.
And all of these women's doctors' orders were the same.
Well, I think that was, isn't that in the medical journals? There's a big study on that.
I don't know what medical
You're sick,
journals you've
therefore
been
you're a
reading.
bad girl, you need a spanking.
Maybe in the 50s, but in the 90s, no. We were a little past that in the 90s.
No.
Yeah.
I'm thinking a grown man trying to spank a grown woman without her permission is some kind of spectacular sicko.
there were
I don't know
even-
what kind. That's my opinion.
There were teams of people that one of their jobs was to warn young reporters coming in, don't be caught alone with this man.
Well, I think somebody should have taken more than a pica pole to his head, but we're going to have to leave it right there. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with more news and analysis. Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. Brandy Ayers did step down as chairman this past week. It took quite a bit of noise to make him go, but he did, Beth.
It did. And, I think one of the important things, like Susan was saying, there were teams of women who would warn young reporters, don't be left alone with him. And I've given those same warnings to young women going into other jobs. When I waited tables, we had a rule, you never leave somebody alone with a manager. And I would encourage our legislator and any business owners to please put in policies and procedures to make sure these things don't happen in your workplace. We can do better.
And make sure if they don't happen, that also the woman can't say, oh, well, he did such and such.
Right.
Just make sure to protect both of them.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, you're going to get some false reports, but this one was solid. Joey Kennedy nailed it, and so did Eddie Burkhalter. Great report by
Quit
him.
his job over it.
Yeah, quit his job.
Quit his job over it.
Somebody needs to hire him. If somebody wants to give us some money, we'll hire him. Anyway.
Start collecting stray reporters.
Yeah, exactly. Well, look what we've got.
It's worked so far, right?
That's how you end up someplace. Sometimes they won't run what you're right.
So, something that happened this week, I think it was very interesting. Justice Glenn Murdock, he resigned from the Supreme Court effective January 16th, Susan. Mm-hmm. And we understand that he's looking at other jobs that he might take up in government.
A lot of people think he's going to run for office. I know that he's expressed to us for quite some time now how frustrated he is in being a justice in this Supreme Court because you really can't get anything accomplished, and he can't do anything outward because he's a justice to say that something's wrong with this Republican Party or this or that or the other. So I think he's just gotten to a point where he's frustrated and he's really ready to get out and do something where he can be effective.
Well, Josh, I mean, he's been around for a long time. I know you're no fan, but he's a strong conservative, and we've had a good relationship with him. But we wish him all the best.
Yeah, I'm typically not a big fan when you use the word strong conservative. Had he resigned right before the Cornerstone decision that he wrote, which has really kind of set our gambling world in Alabama on its ear, I think that, to me, obviously my opinion, but I think it's one of the worst decisions ever written because it just made up law. But, that's my only real issue with him and the rest of that court there is they have had a tendency to kind of make up law as they went along.
Yeah, well, he's a friend of Jack Campbell's, but...
Everybody's a friend of Jack.
Yeah,
exactly. So does Governor Ivey get to appoint somebody?
Yes.
I believe so.
Yeah, yeah, so...
It's going to be interesting who that is.
Yeah, Susan said maybe Brian Taylor. And I'm like, say it's not so.
It's an option.
Do you have to have a law license? I would put my name up.
I think you do, because I was like, maybe I could know, but I don't pass the bar for a
Not
little
for
while.
Attorney General, but for Justice, I think so.
And some probate judges, you don't have to have one.
No, you don't, as a probate judge. Big fundraising numbers coming out, but the interesting thing is, Josh, they're going to be able to basically fundraise the entire session this time.
Well, there's a blackout date, right?
Yeah.
Right? Under law, how long does that blackout date last?
Well, so the law says that there's a fundraising blackout during the legislative session unless the legislative session runs 180 days prior to an election. So basically, they don't want to hamstring themselves from being able to raise money prior to their election. So it opens it up 180 days prior. So basically, we're 120 days. So we'll have this window from January 9th until February 4th. Less than a month.
What do you think?
Why bother? They're going to post-date the checks anyway. Let's not, really?
Remember, too, that this is incumbent protection at its finest, because what happens is incumbents are sitting on the floor all day. They can't fundraise from the State House while their challengers can be out, doing the phones, raising the money. So it's silly, but it's in the law, and I understand why.
It makes sense. It makes sense. But the other thing that we learned this week, Lee Corfman, one of the two women that accused Roy Moore of sexual misconduct. I don't think that he didn't do any spanking.
No.
Yeah. But Lee Corfman has sued Josh, saying that she wants her day in court with Roy Moore.
Yeah, they sued them for defamation there, and it can take some of it. Read through the lawsuit, it takes some of those statements that they've made over the course of that campaign of the last month, and puts them in the lawsuit and explains how that caused her such mental anguish and things. And basically it was when they accused her of outright lying and of taking money for making these claims against him. And she maintains to this point that she never took a dime and has not, and is telling the truth and is willing to go under oath and state that on the record.
Well, and to the point that she's not seeking any damages from this. She's just seeking retraction, an apology, and the court cost.
Well, I'm ready for depositions anytime now.
These are going to be good depositions.
Yeah.
And remember, too, and again, preface this, I'm not a lawyer, but I read the constitutional law textbook one time, and what I learned in there is that there are different standards. So when Roy Moore claims defamation, he's a public figure. So you have to show that something was actually false and the person saying it knew it was false. But with Lee Corfman, she's a private citizen. She hasn't done anything to thrust herself into the spotlight. So it's a different standard there. You can't, as a public figure, just attack private people from your podium and expect to get away with it. So that's going to be an interesting argument in
That's
court.
going to be an argument if indeed, did she become a public figure when she went on the record with the Washington Post. So there's going to be quite a legal argument there. That's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and listen, if it goes to court, it will be one of the greatest shows on earth.
Yes, it really will.
Oh, more all the time.
The circus is backing down.
The gift that just keeps on giving. Josh, this is something you've been covering for quite a while, and we only got about a minute and a half, but I did want to get this in. Joe Reed is now going after John Knight. John Knight's running for Senate. He's leaving his House seat. What is up with that? Why?
Yeah, part 35 of the ongoing feud. Look, this has kind of emblematic of the problems that have existed lately in the Democratic Party in this state, and that is these petty little fights that so often seem to stem from Joe Reed and his office there. He is essentially going after a guy that is going to win a seat for his party, the guy where he's chairing this party. He's going after him and creating this petty nonsense when they could be, he's fundraising to go after him, fundraise to go after the other party. For God's sakes, what are we doing?
Right. When remember, too, Joe Reed did amazing things to increase the number of minority representation in politics.
Yes.
He did amazing work, but now we're only fighting ourselves. And, last I checked, the, chair of the minority caucus in the Democratic Party does not have a legislative agenda. It doesn't matter who's in the legislature as long as we can put as many Democrats in as possible. So let's go, like you said, let's go fight some of these open swing districts and win those instead of fighting each other.
Yeah, it's really a shame what Joe Reed has kind of done to his legacy over the last few years here, because it was a really great legacy up until then.
Yep, and that's going to be the last word on that. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with more news and analysis.
Food security, healthy citizens, and a strong Alabama economy. It all starts with our local family farms. I'm State Senator Tom Watley, and I'm proud of my work to support our local agriculture industry by cutting taxes, pushing to eliminate the overly burdensome regulations, and ensuring our agricultural entrepreneurs have the access they need to a skilled and legal workforce. When we work together to boost all of Alabama, we're boosting our family farms, and we've got more work to do. I'm running for re-election because I want to go back to Montgomery and give the farmers the tools they need to expand, thrive, and continue to serve as the main driver for our economy. I'm Senator Tom Whiteley, and I humbly ask for your vote on Election Day.
Welcome back to the V, the voice of Alabama politics. I know that Beth, you and Josh could not have been more happy when Doug Jones, first Democrat to win a Senate seat in Alabama, and over a decade,
Since Shelby, probably.
quarter of a century, I guess.
Yeah.
So Doug Jones, he has been sworn in. He is there. How long, though? We don't know.
Forever and ever and ever.
I could have been a little happier if that had been the 51st seat.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. Well, I mean, look, he's trying to position himself in the center. He's already said he wants to.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue on. I mean, the idea that he's going to position himself in the center and win this seat that way, it's.
Well, that's just like he ignores us, won't send us any press releases, and thinks that's going to go over well too.
I get his press releases. I get his press releases.
Yeah, but we don't.
Yeah.
I'll forward them.
No, if he doesn't want to give us press releases, I'm not taking them. Anyway, back to what he has done a good job with his chief of staff and some others.
Yeah, he's now has the only African American chief of staff in the Senate. So I think that is a wonderful message to send about.
Democrat.
Right. I think, period. I don't
No.
think there's any Republicans with a black
No,
chief
they
of staff.
do. There's one.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who is it?
I don't know.
Okay.
Don't start with me.
I know. I'm just
They're
legitimately.
starting.
I'm legitimately interested.
I'm just shocked to know that
I am too.
there are
I'm
any Republicans
shocked to know
with
that they
black
knew a
friends.
black guy. But I mean, go ahead.
But he's gotten a great, he's picked, senior staff was released this week. He's got a great senior staff. He's really focused on diversity and inclusion and representation because.
Equal number of men and women, I understand.
And then 2 African American, 2 white. So there's been a good mix of, representing Alabama in a lot of different cross sections.
Well, and listen, I'm pretty sure there is. We'll check it. But, if you look at Senator Shelby with Katie Britt there, the first female chief of staff from Alabama.
she rocks.
Now, she does.
She does.
And then you've got Jones having an African American as his chief of staff. I think that says something nice about Alabama.
Sure it does. I think it says something absolutely great about Alabama. Just the fact that, that Doug Jones is there and not Roy Moore says a lot of great things.
Well, as we've said, it took the Washington establishment, the Washington Post, and a whole bunch of crossover Republicans to beat him, but it did happen. And I do think that Terry Latham, the chair of the party, ought to be worried. I think there's some people that are worried. And I tell you, one of the worst things we heard, the night of the election, some people called John Merrill, or went to see John Merrill, and said, you need to fix this. There's something wrong here. There's voter
That doesn't
fraud.
sound like
There's
something John Merrill's going to do.
And John Merrill was like, this is these are ballots are real. Now, they've looked at all these so-called false complaints. I think they may have less than 16 left. Beth, we know John Merrill never going to do something like that.
Right. Well, and I trust John Merrill 100%. If there are allegations of voter fraud on either side, to look at those. And I trust him to blow the whistle on his own party just as fast as he blows it on the Democrats, because there is right and wrong. And John is the kind of person who can see that line. And I know there was, even after the election, there were times he called me and said, hey, I've heard this rumor. Is there anything that, do you know anything about it? Can you do anything to help substantiate it or, debunk it? What's going on? So I think he's doing his due diligence as he should, but don't dare ask him to rig an election. No. Like, are you crazy? This isn't the Riley administration.
They were basically going,
Baldwin County, ring a bell?
Yeah. We
He's no Nancy
voted for
Worley.
you.
I'll give him that.
Yeah. They were basically going, well, we voted for you, and you're kind of our guy. And he went, you know what? I'm going to follow the law.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, that was, I give John Merrill a little bit of hell from time to time, on Twitter mainly. But but I do like John. I think that in a lot of ways, I disagree with some of the things that he's done and some stances that he takes from time to time. But I think in terms of doing his job in that regard, he has done an exceptional job. And in this case, he investigated a lot of really petty things, really petty allegations of voter fraud, and he knew what he was doing. Normally, he would not have gone out and done that. But then when the vote was certified, nobody could question whether or not that he had gone out and investigated these things, and this was a real vote, and there was no voter fraud.
It would be a better Alabama if we had more John Merrills in office and in leadership.
Well, and then you look at that office. They do with less. They do more, and they do it faster. Nobody does
he went in there with 40-plus employees. They're down to 36. And they're much more effective than they were with the 40-plus people.
That's leadership, not only at the top, but at the mid-level, all the way down. He's got a great team over there. Those guys are super.
He does something really different? He actually expects his people to show up at 8 o'clock and not leave until after 5.
I was going to try and hit him up for a job after I graduate, but that 8 a.m. show up thing, I don't know. I don't know about all that.
Maybe I can get a second job. I don't know. Who knows?
And plus, you got to go with him to all the TV interviews.
No, I can't do that. No.
I wonder if he ever got his custom little ear thing.
I don't know. I hope so. Hey, we got 2 more items I want to get to. One is Todd Stacy, former
everything.
Started off with Bob Riley as his associate spokesperson. Then he worked for J. Love when they ran him for office and lost. Then he comes back to Riley. Then he goes to Hubbard. He was there right up until the last few months before Hubbard's boat started sinking.
Yeah, what a track
then he
record.
Then he went to work for Martha Roby. Now he's come back, Susan. He's going to start a news site.
Went to work for Martha Roby. Let's back up right there, okay? They got him heck out of Dodge when the Hubbard stuff started hitting the fan because he was right there in the middle of it.
Well, he certainly would have known where some of the bodies were buried right off the bat. And Josh, but I mean, I'm not a fan, but he seems to think
of me?
No.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Of Todd's sort of tenure here, because he wasn't always exactly honest with the press, myself included. But it is interesting that he thinks there's a need. I mean, as far as I know, when I flip on the internet, I'm bombarded by state news, but none like,
I don't really know where that falls, and I know how he set it up, and as to be some political playbook kind of knockoff at the state level, and I don't know that there's a need for that, and I don't know that he can kind of pull it off to that degree.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the political playbook, there are a lot of sources coming from a lot of different angles on that, and I don't know that that's necessarily something that works at this level.
Well, it's tough. I mean, we've been at it 7 years. We know how tough it is, Susan. But we're hearing that BCA, or at least Billy Canary, is behind him. That ought to be the kiss of death right there.
That should be the kiss of death. And we're right here at the session starting. We're right here at political season starting to ramp up. It smells to me like trying to craft the message. And they're going to take sponsored content from my understanding. Branded. Yeah,
branded.
That bothers me.
Same thing. Anyway, we're going to have to leave it right there. Wow. Sadly, this week, or last week, we lost some important folks. Newscaster Bill Bolin, and also Rick Hall of fame. Muscle Shoals sound that went around the world. Thank you for watching The V. You watch us because we watch them.